Hi there folks, back again for another video. In this one we're returning to Middle-earth, but we're going to be looking at Middle-earth from, the first age rather than it being the third age. Recently I was inspired by a bunch of different YouTube channels like JMax channel and also Battle Campus channel, where they're doing a lot of first stagey stuff, to have a look at trying to replicate some of those characters on the tabletop, and then think about how exactly they might be used in game and what kind of miniatures you'd use, and also the profiles that would then be used in order to bring those to life on the tabletop so you could use them in your games as small warbands or whatever you wanted to do. So one of the things that really inspired me was reading through and listening to The Children of Túrin and the story of Turin and Beleg. So Túrin, when he departed from Guarwaith, he went off into the woods and he met up with the Guarwaith, or I think that's Guarwaith is how you say it, which are the wolf men. And this kind of led him to be like this sort of outlaw band leader that went around hunting down orcs and all sorts of different things. And then eventually Beleg came to find Túrin and was kind of trussed up by the outlaws, the bandits, was finally released. And in that, both Turin and Beleg sort of wandered around fighting orcs and all sorts of different things before Beleg's unfortunate death. Spoilers for The Children of Túrin and the Silmarillion, I guess. But I thought it'd be a really fun little kind of warband to do, or at least an army, and maybe even an army to do, based around Turin and Beleg and their adventures alongside the Guarwaith throughout the lands of the First Age. So some of the artwork and stuff was kind of inspiring for what I wanted to try and do. There's a lot of art of Túrin out there. A lot of the time it's showing him with the dragon helm of Dorlomin and stuff, and he's looking very resplendent in his various armors, his arms and armor. And I know a lot of people use other miniatures to represent Túrin from historical war games. They use a lot of Saxon miniatures or Arthurian stuff, like stuff that you might get from the likes of footsore miniatures and things like that, in order to make their miniatures for Túrin and things. Beleg's a little easier because Beleg's an elf and there's lots of good elf models around, so trying to find something that works for him is pretty easy. I think I've had a talk about it before when I thought about looking at the Silmarillion age and wargaming during the age of the Silmarillion, and there'll be a link to that video at the end of this one if you want to go and check that out. But I was kind of inspired by looking at the Middle-earth range itself, and I know a lot of people will say that you could just use the Aragorn miniature, but one of the things that I've always liked about the representation of Túrin is that you tend to see him with almost very elven-esque features, despite being a man. And so carrying that through into the the miniatures range, I think is probably cool. And so for that reason, I was having a look at some of the other miniatures that were out there, and the one that I settled on was actually the miniature for Beregond that you can get for Minas Tirith. So I took the miniature and I kind of did a little bit of painting up of it to try and kind of make it feel a little bit more first agey. So I kind of did a little bit. I distressed the tree that was worked onto his breastplate so that it would kind of look. I mean, initially I was thinking of trying to get rid of the whole thing, but it was very hard to get rid of the entire stuff with what I had. So I was like, maybe if I just kind of leave it as kind of a distressed tree, it'll look a little bit like he's kind of found the armor when he's been alongside the rest of the Guarwaith or something like that. I did the cloak in sort of like a pinky red, which I thought was quite a nice way to kind of bring through that first stage feel. Tried to tie in a lot of the blues and the golds that you tend to see in the artwork for Túrin Bar. And then sort of working in darker colours as well there for the wood and things. I also tried to get the sword looking like his legendary blade, but the one that eventually is used in the death of Beleg, unfortunately. I tried to kind of bring the miniature to life in that sense, and I think pastel colours and that kind of thing really works for the idea of the first age, because it almost has this kind of happier quality to it, even though it's really dark and somber in places, compared to like the autumn feel that you get for the third age, which I guess is less dour, at least to begin with. But yeah, I think kind of like springy colours works nicely for the Silmarillion, like spring pastels and things. And then you have the sort of autumn stuff for the third age, as the realm of fantasy is slowly diminishing and the elves are leaving and the dwarves are going back to their holds and things like that. I also did a miniature for Beleg Strongbow, so he's kind of like an analogy for Legolas, really, in the third age. He's, you know, a master huntsman and bowman, but plays a pretty integral part in a lot of the stories of the Silmarillion era and the first age as well, and kind of wanted to carry through a lot of those kind of colours that you see popping up during the artwork and stuff for the first age. So lots of kind of, again, sort of light greens and blues, and that white as well, the off-white, I think is quite nice. Maybe if I come back to this, I'd do this in sort of like a cream, so I'd highlight this up again, just to kind of make it pop a little bit more. I'm always a fan of this Balthazar Gold on anything really at the moment now, and I think that kind of resonates quite nicely with the Silmarillion. Obviously it is sword and a little bit more of a bright, shining silver there as well. But yeah, I think the models both came out quite nicely. It was interesting. I do wonder whether or not I could have taken a little bit of extra time on them, but I'm quite happy with how they've turned out, really. And they now stand on my shelf quite nicely. It's just always one of those things where when you start to take photos of the miniatures, you start to be like, oh, God, I missed a bit, or I should have done extra here, or something like that. But anyway, I quite like them. I think they've turned out okay. So now I have the miniatures. I was thinking about exactly what I might do in terms of rules. Now, you know, could just use the rules for Beregond and the Lothlorien captain, but I don't think that would necessarily work well with the vibe that you're trying to get across, and the fact that these are legendary heroes essentially. And so I thought it would be kind of cool to have a look at some of the different profiles that could be used for the different characters. So some of my initial thoughts actually were to use something like King Elisar. So Elisar is obviously like the roided up Aragorn for you to use, and he has Andúril, Flame of the West, which would be a great kind of sort of analog to Gurthang the sword. Is it Gurthang? I think it is. Someone can correct me in the comments down below. And obviously he has lots of things that would make him great for use in your games. Comes with his heavy armor and magical sword, so you know, does a lot of the things that you'd think he should be able to do if you were transferring him over to become Beleg. He's also got all the different heroic actions, and he's got the Stand Out of the West rule as well, so you could use him as a version of that. He doesn't have the bow though, which I think would be quite nice to carry through. Another one I was thinking of when it came to Beleg was Faramir. Now, not a lot of people use the Faramir profile. I still think he's pretty good. His special rules not particularly in keeping with what you want to do with Beleg, I don't think. But he does have access to all of the different things that you'd want. So he can have the ability to have heavy armor, can have a bow, etc., etc. So can have all the different things. And he comes with a decent quantity of might, will, and fate, which I think is quite good. The kind of profiles that I thought I would go for actually, though, is to look at the Fellowship. Before I go to the actual Fellowship, let's talk about Beleg, actually. So for Beleg, I was looking at him, and I was like, well, Haldir is a pretty good way to go. Decent might, good enough will, and his fate being 1 kind of ties quite nicely into the fact that he has this very ill-fated death later on in the storyline. He also has the ability to pass courage test if he's within 12 inches, automatically pass courage test if he's within 12 inches of Aragorn, which will tie into what I was thinking about later to use the Strider Aragorn profile to represent Túrin, because I think, you know, they are allies to the end. They're like bosom buddies, the best of friends. You know, they've done everything together. So having them sort of tied in that way, I think would work quite nicely. Again, comes with a decent fight, strength, defense, attacks, wounds, courage, everything. And he has the one final blow rule as well there. So even when he's slain, he'll get to strike out, which I think is quite nice. Kind of like that last desperate attempt. Obviously, again, comes with the ability to have the elf bow and the elven cloak. And he's also got the elven hand and a half sword, which obviously the miniature already has. Obviously, he's not going to strike out at Túrin when Túrin accidentally stabs him, but you know, it works out quite nicely, I think, as the character. This then made me look at the Fellowship profiles. So before we go to Aragorn, we obviously have Legolas, which would be obviously a great analogue for Beleg. Comes with, again, good might, will, and fate, and a decent profile as well. Has the ability to wear armor if you want him to, but it has the elven cloak. He does have the daggers and an elf bow rather than it being sword, which is unfortunate. But comes with the deadly shot rule, which is very good. The final count one doesn't necessarily work very well because obviously you're not going to take something dwarven. You're not going to take a Gimli-esque character in the group. We're not going to do a Mim, and he's not necessarily going to help either, really, is he? But you know, if you're a fan of the stories of the Silmarillion, you know that there's some bad blood there, I guess. But yeah, he's got the deadly shot ability, which would be really, really good to have because it would kind of match with him being this deadly archer. But in the end, I actually genuinely think that the Haldir profile is actually probably on par with what you want to do when it comes to Beleg. Now, I think if you were settle on Haldir for that, you've got some good rules there. You've got all the things you need in order to use him on the tabletop. Tie him then in with Aragorn Strider from the Fellowship. He's still got Andúril Flame of the West, which would be a good analogue for the sword, obviously, which is really good. He can have armor, he can have a bow, he can have a cloak, so you can tie him into the Guarwaith a little bit more there. Also, the vibe is very much more him being the kind of wanderer, which works very nicely in most cases for what you want to try and do with Túrin during this period in terms of storytelling as well. So that's a pretty good way to go. Obviously, you're going to pay a bucket of extra points for having Andúril / Guarthang there, but you know, that's not necessarily, I think, to wince at when you're going to be making a pretty awesome narrative force there. It's not necessarily going to be one that's going to, you know, rock the boat competitively. But, you know, Aragorn in the mix there alongside Haldir, I think would be the good profiles to use for both of those characters. Then you've got the Guarwaith themselves. So what are you going to do for them? The option for me that I think works the best is to go down the route of doing the Rangers of Gondor. So the Rangers of Gondor are going to be your kind of classic analogue for what you want to do with kind of men as bandits kind of thing. I was thinking of Blackroot Vale archers. But then you're messing around with all sorts of different faction things and all sorts of stuff like that. I mean, obviously, it doesn't necessarily matter if you don't care about all the other bits and pieces, like special rules and all that kind of thing. If you just want to mash together a cool army with a bunch of different figures from the good side, then there's no reason that you can't do it and just say hell to it, really, I suppose. But, you know, they come with armor, sword, and bow. They're good shots. They can have spears if you want them to as well, which I think is a really nice way. And you could just play around with lots of different characters, really, to be honest, in terms of the Rangers of Gondor. I was actually looking at Cirion and using him to represent one of the kind of like lieutenants within the Guarwaith. So use him as one of the characters that is kind of like fought by Túrin's side when he sort of takes over during his time with the Outlaws. So I think that would be kind of cool to do. But yeah, so I was thinking about the Rangers of Gondor, obviously. If you wanted to do some more stuff with elves, so if you wanted to bulk out the list a little bit more, if you're using Haldir, that obviously is going to give you access to more stuff for Lorien and Lothlorien. So you could go with the Wood Elf Warriors in that sense. So bring them out. They have a range of different weapons. They're pretty damn good. They have Woodland Creature, which is an awesome special rule for them. So they can leap through cover, which is good. They have Thrown Daggers and all that kind of thing. So, and also the models are really nice for the Wood Elf Warriors as well. So you could do some really fun stuff with that one. It would just come down to exactly what you wanted to do with the army, I suppose, in terms of looking at the way that you were setting up the force, because that's the thing that's going to potentially kill you, is trying to work out how you're going to fit that into a force at different points levels and how many models you want to throw in, because it's just going to be a lot of outlaws, to be honest. You could use different captains, I guess, to represent some of the men within the Gaurwaith that could come in at those different levels to lead different warbands if you wanted to, which would be quite nice to do. I mentioned earlier as well that I was looking at Mim and how that would thing. So that's the poor chap, the poor dwarf who gets attacked by the bandits and his son gets killed, and he sort of makes the oath to one of the other members of the Gaurwaith that he shall never fire his bow again and that kind of thing. And I was thinking of what could you do for a kind of treacherous dwarf, or a dwarf that has been wronged by the others and so is out to try and get revenge. And I actually genuinely thought that Thrain the Broken would probably be a pretty good profile for that. You know, it kind of matches with, especially with the Shattered Spirit rule, so that he can run around and he can be controlled by different sides, which I think is quite nice, and you can add bonuses to it, which is really cool. I thought it was quite cool. So you could throw that into the game and just have him kind of like in the background perhaps or something. I mean, Mim's not necessarily like totally done for in the storylines and stuff, but I think it'd be it could make for some interesting storytelling on the tabletop if you're like, right, I also have this random dwarf, which I thought would be quite nice. But yeah, so it's interesting looking through the story, especially during this period, because there's some really fascinating storytelling that you can do in this. You can also sort of take things to the next level as things go through. So after Beleg's gone, you could look to Nargothrond and you could play around with Anglakel. That's the sword. Not what was I thinking of when it came to it? Was it called something else beforehand? I can't remember. Anyway. Is that the sword? It is the sword. Yeah, he renamed it Gurthang. That's what it is. God damn it. Man, I knew my lore. Jesus. Right, anyway, I'm not going to doubt myself. But anyway, so yeah, if you're there's some really interesting storytelling to be done here, and obviously you could sort of work towards the eventual clash with Gurthang, with Glaurung, with the use of Gurthang. So many G's. So you can actually play out this sort of like battle between Túrin and Glaurung, and that kind of final moments for him. I think that would be kind of awesome if you're playing around with that. But yeah, these are just some of the things that I've been working on at the moment. I wanted something a little bit different to paint, which wasn't Warcry and Warhammer stuff, and obviously Middle-earth is great to return to all the time. It's my little comfort game. It's something that I always want to come back to. And so I've been playing around with painting up some miniatures that would be useful as heroes to use in your games. I think going with what I was suggesting, so having Aragorn Strider represent Túrin, and then Haldir representing Beleg would be a good way to go. Play around with the Rangers of Gondor being used as your Gaurwaith in the game, and then if you wanted to, you could throw in some elven warriors that have come in alongside Beleg. And then if you wanted to throw a funky dwarf in the mix, why not? Then you can also do that as well, which I think is quite nice. Sod the rules, just play around and have fun with it, I guess. So yeah, if you've had any thoughts on diving into the first stage and doing a little bit of wargaming in this period, then I would recommend that you show off what you've been doing in the comments and stuff. Just tell me what you've been up to. You know, have you chosen different miniatures to represent the characters from this period? Have you gone beyond Games Workshop? The only reason that I stuck with the Games Workshop stuff was because it would work nicely scale-wise with the rest of the range, and it was obviously an easy way for people to be like, so that character means this, and that kind of character means this. And if I was ever to go to an event with these, then obviously they would work nicely as kind of like easy signifiers, because you'd be like, that is easily a wood elf, that is easily a human, that would represent the different characters and things like that. It would be interesting to see if there's anything from the back catalogue of miniatures that would actually work quite nicely to represent the different characters. There must be some other miniatures that would be good. Like, I think Unarmoured Haldir would probably be a quite nice miniature to use to represent Beleg. And then obviously you'd have a much easier time referencing that on the tabletop, rules-wise. I'm not sure for Beleg. I quite like a lot of the stuff that was done in the Minas Tirith range, because they're all kind of like clean shaven, which works really nicely for what you want to do with Túrin. If only there was someone with a dragon helm, or maybe I could just sculpt a dragon helm and sit it on his base or something like that. That might be the way to go. There must be something out there that I could use to represent that. But anyway, that's for another time. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment below. Do you like what I've been up to when it comes to the first stage in the Silmarillion? Have you ever thought about doing something similar yourself? Are there different profiles that you'd use? How would you eventually come around to assembling the army to use it on the tabletop? Would it be an interesting experiment? Would it be mad? Would it not work? Does it matter, I suppose? There's a link down below to my Ko-fi page if you like what I do and you want to follow on with what I'm doing, and you want to give me a little bit of a donation towards cups of tea and hobby supplies and all that kind of thing. It's always welcome. But you don't have to do that. The most important thing is that you comment, like, share, subscribe, do all that good stuff, because I just love chatting with you folks about what you're up to and what you're doing, and all your different theories and thoughts on different games and miniatures lines and things like that. So yeah, make sure to get stuck into the comments and share your thoughts. In the meantime, I'm going to be thinking about exactly how I'd paint Rangers of Gondor to represent the Gaurwaith. Will I just use all the miniatures that I've just painted from Battle of Osgiliath? That would probably be a good idea. I wouldn't have to paint anything extra then. Just some wood elves to paint that, I suppose. But anyway, I'm going to move on, and I'll be back with another video very soon. So yeah, dive into the comments down below, folks, and I'll see you very soon. Bye.